Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Pastoral World Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the host of the station. Folks, with me today is such a sweet, dear person. I had Lillian Brummett on before, and she is amazing. And that's why you need to subscribe to Chatting with Betsy, so you could hear my past guests and present and future guests. Lillian is an award-winning poet, author, blogger, and entrepreneur. Lillian joins us today to discuss the healing power of poetry and to read some of the poetry she wrote during the journey out of the depths of depression and grief. She is author of Poetic Wanderings, which she will discuss, as we said, and share her father-in-law's poetry collection. And it is their way of honoring and celebrating his life, and his name is Frank Nick Brummett. And Lillian, welcome to Chatting with Betsy again.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this show. Great to have you here. Oh, I love talking about poetry, so thanks for having me here to talk about this.
You're welcome. And would you mind if I dedicate this show to your father-in-law?
Oh, that would be fine.
Okay. So we dedicate this show to Frank Nick Brummett. And, folks, I just have to say this because as someone who is grieving, and you know what, Lillian, I just have to say it the way it is because I'm a Jersey girl. People think that when someone dies and after the funeral, you should stop. What people don't realize until they lose someone, because I didn't realize this until I lost Matt. I mean, my father had died before, but your dad and your husband, two different relationships. You will forever love and miss your loved one, unless, of course, you didn't like them to begin with. That's a whole different story. But we miss the physical presence, and we will grieve. There is a permanent ache in our hearts that is just there. Yet we go on living, and life is different, but people don't get that. And I really want to drive that home to the audience, because when you tell someone, aren't you over it? Get over it. No, there's no getting over it, folks. But anyway, I digress. What's your feelings on that, Lillian? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, I wrote this poem called Elephant, and it was published in one of our poetry books, Rhythm and Rhyme, and it's talking exactly about what you're talking about right now. The weight of the grief and how it will visit you. There were times, especially after the passing of my parents, as you know from previous discussions, back in 2010, my parents chose their own ending. They were both chronically ill, and they decided to go together. But it was a big shock for me. It might have been a more comfortable way out for them, but it was really difficult for those left behind. And there were times when I thought, oh, no problem. I'm over this now. I've moved on. I can go on and it was still walking wounded, but I can go on. But then all of a sudden, there I was in the middle of this grocery store, and I started crying just for no reason. There was nothing in the grocery store to trigger me. It wasn't like, oh, a special memory came up or, because I saw cereal or something. It was just all of a sudden standing there in the aisle, and I felt so helpless to that feeling. And I had to, go and recoup myself in the car, and I don't think I went back to the grocery store for a few days. But I was just like, where did that come from? Just all of a sudden, out of the blue, totally fine day, wasn't thinking, didn't go into the store with a heavy mind. It just hit me all of a sudden, boom, out of the blue. That actually frightened me a little bit because I felt like it was something uncontrollable, like something that I was going to be vulnerable to. Like when is it going to hit me next? When I'm in the middle of a meeting, I felt like just very insecure with just my whole presence and my whole being for quite some time afterwards. Today, that particular grief, here we're talking quite some time later, 15 years later, and it's not as heavy, but I still have the moments of ache. When I get into deep conversations, people will, I'll go into, like, say, a suicide prevention genre podcast, and we'll talk about the effect of those who are left behind. And it'll hit me, or I'll be reading some poetry, and the emotion will hit me, and I'll just be like, well, where did that come from, And it's it's kind of strange,
I'm not a psychologist, folks, but I have interviewed people who have lost loved ones to suicide, and I think, in my opinion, that when that happens, of course the ones left behind are wondering, and depending on the circumstance, why didn't I see the signs? Why didn't they tell me? How come I didn't recognize it? And the thing is, when people are just bent on doing that, they will hide their feelings. They will hide what they're going to do. Some people announce it, and some don't. And, the people left behind are wondering, they blame themselves. And I highly suggest, and then to deal with that, and that shock, and then the loss of that loved one, excuse me, is very devastating. I've also cried in our grocery store, Lillian. It's weird in a way because I'm at Ludmilla Mars. They're a marshmallow cookie with chocolate, dark chocolate, over it, under like a graham cracker type crust. And some people don't know what they are that aren't on the East Coast of the United States. And you know what? Sometimes it doesn't bother me, and all of a sudden I can see a big display, and I burst into tears. That's the way grief is. We can't control it. What I've been told and listening to grief counselors is to just accept how you feel and validate it, because the more we try to resist it, in my case anyway, the more I would feel it. Excuse me. So I just let myself be sad for that, time, and then I go on with my day. But, a lot of people don't understand that how it could hit you. You're watching a program, you hear a song, you might be reading a poetry, right? And something in it just might, remind you of that person. And that's the way it is. And I just have to say that this past holiday season was the first time in 5 years I was able to enjoy hearing Christmas music again. Because it was so triggering for me that I couldn't listen to it.
Right.
So it takes time.
It does.
It really does. But I would like to know, I'll start with this, what inspired you to write the book Poetic Wanderings?
Okay, that's the third book in our poetic, our Playing with Words poem series. So we have a 3-book series currently. Who knows? We might make it into 4. And it's different. Each book has a certain specific genre. So Towards Understanding is the first book of poetry. That's basically my healing journey from childhood into early adulthood from a difficult past, and my questioning my value and purpose in life and coming towards understanding that I could have value, that I matter. So the second book that we released is a combination of Dave and my poetry, and it's called Rhythm and Rhyme. And so it's like more like dealing with grief, dealing with long-term relationships, our passion for environment and music. So that's what that book is about. The third book is the most recent, which is the one we're talking about today, and that's Poetic Wanderings. And we published this. It's a collection of Dave's late father. He was a poet since a very young man, and really pursued it in earnest as he got closer towards retirement. And it's his lifetime collection of poetry shared in this book.
Oh, very nice. And that is a lovely way to honor your father-in-law. And you know what, Lynn, I guess I say this all the time. This is my own opinion, folks. The best way for me, this is how I feel, to honor Matt's memory or my brother's or my parents is to enjoy life and help others. And
to share their
that's
stories.
And to share their stories, yes.
Right.
And that's what you're doing, Lillian. That's what you're doing.
It's so important whether we do it verbally or we write about it or however we get that out. It's so important to pass on their story. I mean, our children, our nephews, our nieces, they're hungry for that information. And even if right now it's not paramount in their minds, as time moves forward and they start thinking about their family history, they'll have memories of you sharing the family history. And so sharing those stories are just so important as to who you are and where you come from. And it's missing.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a piece missing if you don't have that information.
That's true. I remember going to my grandmother's, and she would tell me stories of, coming to America. And unfortunately, I didn't write them down, but I thought that my grandmother could have written a romance novel, how she ran with my grandfather to Europe. She didn't talk about the ship. No one knows anything about the ship, so who knows what went on there. But and then again, different stories were told to different people. My cousin knew stories that I didn't know about. So a whole different, side. So it is important. It is an important piece of family heritage and history to know. So I'm glad that you wrote this book to not only honor your father-in-law, but to share his story and to pass it on to other family members and the public as well, who can benefit from it.
He was a fantastic storyteller when it came to his writing. Here, I'd like to read this, actually, if it's okay.
Sure.
It's called A Wartime Love. It is such a powerful story. Let's see if I can do it this time without tearing up a little.
That's okay if you cry. I might cry along with you.
Okay. All right, everyone, bear with us. Okay. It's called A Wartime Love. You can find it on page 17 of Poetic Wanderings, which you can get on Amazon. They met at the dance in the old church hall. She was pretty and petite. He was handsome and tall. Folks may laugh about love at first sight. For her and for him, it happened that night. Her heart skipped a beat as he came through the door in his Air Force blue on leave from the war. He crossed the room, their eyes met, a magic moment they'll never forget. He said, "I'm Bob." She said, "I'm Louise." He felt shaky. He felt weak in the knees. He thought to himself, how can this be? And then softly he said, "Please dance with me." They danced every dance. He held her so tight. Somehow they both knew it was only for tonight. Her head on his shoulder, his lips brushed her hair. Their love was the world, with no one else there. At last, at midnight, the dancing was done. Their evening of bliss was ended and gone. Later, by a street lamp, they stood side by side, and he saw the tears that she was trying to hide. He said, "Tomorrow I return to my plane, and I fear I may never come back again." She said, "I'll remember forever every day." They gently kissed. He kissed her cheek, and he walked away. Her home was hit when a buzz bomb came. She died in the flames, breathing his name. His plane shot down as he crashed in the sea. His final words were, "Come dance with me."
Wow.
I almost did it. I got a little choked. I almost did it. Okay.
That's okay. Wow, that's powerful. And what's the name of that poem? Is it Wartime Love?
A Wartime Love, yeah, on page 17 of Poetic Wanderings. And the book is just filled with poems, you know. A lot of it is celebrating his joy and nature and stories of his youth. Sometimes he's just like making up funny stories with his poems, and sometimes he's telling like the history of a certain area. Like he has a poem where he wrote about Phoenix, which is his old mining town near Grand Forks, BC, and that has this huge historic mine country. And so he did this little poem about that, and memories of growing up in the Okanagan and stuff like that is in there too. Towards the end of the book, there are some poems about like losing his wife and dealing with his grief and retiring on his own thereafter, and his joys of writing. He really delved into like just the joy of writing. He loved studying poetry books in regards to the craft of writing, and so some of those poems in there are like something he took on as an assignment, a certain kind of writing or a certain way of using words or something like that he was experimenting with. So for me as a poet, I get really jazzed up about that and kind of excited and inspired by, seeing how he played with words and the things that he was, trying out as a poet, his journey as a writer. So I guess it depends on how you look at the writing. But for me, I see that side of it, and I get all excited. I'm, like, ready to put my hands to keyboard or pen to paper and get going, you know.
That is cool. Yeah, sometimes, Lillian, I remember, like, doing poetry in school, and people think, oh, poetry has to rhyme. No, it doesn't have to rhyme, does it?
No, it doesn't have to rhyme. There should be something to it, though. Like there should be some sort of rhythm to it, some sort of flow with the words. And, especially if it doesn't have either one of those things, it has to have a powerful enough message that it leaves the person with, like, it impacts, it hits that person. And so the person that's reading it. And so the poet has to be very, very careful, Otherwise, it's just a bunch of words on paper. It's just someone's thoughts that day. And to me, that's not really real poetry. That's just you purging your thoughts on paper. That's not quite the same as, putting the skill in there too. But there's all different ways of writing. They can be very short. They can be really sweet. Like, here's one from Towards Understanding. I'm going to read this one because it's February coming up, and it's just a way of celebrating the month of February. Is one that I wrote. It's called February's Silent Embrace. The waves softly touching desert-like sands, the seagulls making known their demands, the wind whispering through budded leaves, the water rises as the snow grieves. Familiar birds fly back home to ready their nests for the unborn. Colors change from gray to green as the rain washes Earth's face clean. The stars shine brighter than before, as do the eyes of those who adore the glorious feelings from this wondrous place brought by the tides of February's silent embrace. And so for that one, you can see that it's both rhythm and some rhyme thrown in there in order to give that, impact to the words in just the right spot to create this visual art, this visual in the reader's mind. Hopefully they're hearing the seagulls, they're seeing the imageries, as they're reading that poem. They're smelling the smell of being by the lake and watching the snow melt. And so that moment is captured, and that visual imprint is now in their mind as they read that poem. So poetry can be used in a lot of different ways. It depends on the artistic style and the use at the time, the impact that you want to have with it.
I envy anyone who can write poetry, books. I think it's just a talent. I don't know if it's a inborn talent or people learn as they go along. I think it's a gift. I really do. Some people just have it.
Yeah, for me, it has always been a gift to myself. It didn't become a gift to share to others until much, much later in life. To me, it was a way of purging my emotions, of understanding what I was feeling, of seeing it on paper, of diagnosing it, of evaluating it, of seeing how I was feeling change over time. Very introspective, very much a self-examination sort of tool that I used to deal with all the, stuff that had been built up within myself. And then later on, I realized that by sharing what I could feel comfortable of sharing, that other people would be impacted by that. It was the words that they couldn't say, kind of like songs do the same thing for us. Songs, and even if it doesn't have lyrics, music will do that for us. It will express how we're feeling. It will soothe our inner bones, our inner self. It will take us into this realm of not being alone and comforted in the emotion that we currently have, of feeling that emotion and being okay with feeling that emotion, truly and honestly, wherever we are at that point with that emotion, as opposed to having to put on a face because now you're in public. This is a very introspective, very inner sort of impact that it can have on a person. And so, it's until I learned that, before I was always, very shy about sharing it, very frightened about how people would feel about it, about how I would be judged. How are people going to feel about me now that I've, ripped myself open and I'm completely, naked and ugly in front of you. And so I thought, how is this going to be interpreted? But I didn't realize that it wasn't really them judging me. It was more how they interpreted that piece into their own life and their own life experiences. So someone would take a poem, and to them it might mean something completely different than how I actually wrote it. And song musicians, lyricists, they'll find that too. They'll write something and it means something to them, and then the public will take it and they hear something else. They're off on another journey with that music, and those lyrics mean something else to them. So as much as our intent is to communicate what we're feeling, you never know, how it will be actually taken by the reader and where they will go with it.
That's true. It's funny that you mentioned about being naked, because I just interviewed someone yesterday, so the show's not out yet, who wrote a book naked city. And, I think artists, and I consider writers artists, because to me they're artists on paper with their words.
Okay.
Artists, whether you're a singer, you're a poet, whether you write novels or fiction, nonfiction, or paint or whatever you do, I think people don't understand that with artists, and that's why I think artists are very, in a way, sensitive. They, a lot of them are usually have depression, and they use their art, to open themselves up and to express themselves. And I think that's very brave. I think it's very, very brave, Lillian. I think you're very brave. When someone can take their feelings, I wish I was good at writing, and put it on paper and make it a poem, put it into poetry, you don't know how that's going to affect someone else. You really don't. And it can, it helps people when other people share their stories. And I've done, shows on that, storytelling. How important is that to share our experiences and to show our humanity to each other, to share? Because we think, I'm the only one who feels this way. And we're not. There's other people who are going through either the same or similar experiences.
It's funny, and I think those of us with some type of artistic inclination, whether we release it to the public or not, we grow to depend on it, right? That's our cushion. That's our soft place to fall. That's where we find our comfort zone. That's where we can delve into self and just be and explore. But if that ever leaves us, it can be an extremely scary moment. Like, there was a time when I was so overcome with depression that I lost the ability to write. And poetry has always been, like, I can always write. And so pen to paper, fingers to keyboard, no problem. But this time period, my soul was empty. My writing soul was empty. And there was a bit of panic set in, like serious panic set in, where I was like, where did this go? How could this be? And it took, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. I didn't track how long. And then all of a sudden, snap, and I was able to write. And this is what I wrote. It's called Graying. Graying, stringy hair, flattened, long and unattended, hands, coffee, sweat, slick as memories flit by, like flashes in a lightning storm, angered by the loss of a tool used to spark newly discovered memories, hazy and faded, or fill gaps in time to uncover misunderstandings and shed this pain of mine. Oh, how I long to call and chat just one more time, saddened at faults in me, unraveled by the grief, errors glowing, lighting up dark tunnels of the past. Yet there is an understanding just the same, forgiveness and acceptance, a letting go, and an embracing of the reflection of mother's traits in me. And so that came out as I was sitting there, hating the loss of the tool, and bang, my pen, I haven't edited it, not a word was changed. I put that out, and it just captures that moment of sitting there lamenting it, and yet ironically with pen in hand writing it, right? Like, it was such a weird moment.
That's an intense poem. That you could really feel the weight of your emotion, and I think that's like talking to artists who share their deep feelings with their words, song, they are exposing themselves. So it is kind of a form of being naked, because you are exposing yourself as an artist, no matter how you choose to express it. And I think being an artist of any type of form takes a lot of guts. It really does, because the people are just putting themselves out there. You know, even being a comedian is being an artist, because you don't know if your joke is going to bomb or not. You're taking that chance. Everyone who goes up on stage is taking a chance of, you know, or people think, oh, well, what are people going to think of this? How are they going to accept it? I just say, you know what? Go for it. You got to do what your gut tells you to do.
You know, and 90% of them aren't out there for the self-gratification either. Like deep down, their biggest dream is that what they put out there, whether, you know, it's their theater or their music or their writing, whatever it is that they're putting out there, impacts the world in some positive direction, that they're able to open the mind of the listeners that moment to a new idea or a new concept, or to be exposed to an emotion or a situation. Like even if you're writing fiction and you're trying to bring an idea or a concept to your readers to try to push forward that consciousness in that direction, and, you know, creating your own little ripple effect, you know, towards improving the world in one way or another. And we're all out there contributing. We're all having an impact out there. And, you know, I think people who are able to release their art out there to the public are you know, deep down, that's really what they're hoping for, you know.
I think people who are poets, they just have a way to capture how they feel and put it, and to be able to put into words. I just admire that. I have a friend who I met on Facebook, and he's a poet, and he never ceases to amaze me. And he goes, Betsy, you always get my poetry. And I guess because I'm an empath, so I could feel the emotion that he's trying to, you know, put in his poem. But just what you, the poems that you have read to us, and the last poem is just such intense emotion that I admire people who could do that.
Okay.
And I think,
well, I did try to choose the ones I thought might, you know, suit your audience too. But, you know, I do find that writing, as good as much from a selfish point of view, as healing as it can be, for me, in the world of writing, most of it to me is business. I'm writing to market. I'm writing because the audience is there and they want a certain topic, or I'm writing to for a particular magazine because they have a need for a certain kind of article or something like that. And so to me, it's more business. Whereas in the realm of poetry, I get to bring out the color crayons. You know, I get to dig into the sandbox of words, and I get to, you know, just play with words as well. So it isn't always, you know, heavy or that, but it's also a way for me to, like, just get creative and just, you know, have fun with playing with words and be inspired by others and give it a try on my own, and, you know, just have fun sometimes too.
Yeah. There's, I would call it playful poetry.
Yeah.
It's all, you know, different. It could be light. It's just what the person, the poet, is trying to say at that time, what they might be experiencing or feeling as they're writing. And I do believe that is really a gift.
Yeah, it's kind of like, as a writer, you know, a self-employed, you know, entrepreneur writer, it's kind of like for, like, normal people. You guys all go on vacations or cruises or Fuji or something like that. We go we go into poetry. That's our vacation and our refreshment area, our place to play and have fun. One of the things that I've been doing to just as a writer creative exercise, it has nothing to do with poetry, but just to have fun again with writing, is I've been trying to describe certain things that I've noticed on our walks. There's a dog trail near our home, just a flat little area that I sometimes walk on when I'm up to it. And different seasons, different things are going on, but right now there's a lot of leaves on the ground. And so I'm trying to think about, okay, how does the leaves sound today? How do they feel today? What is, are they wet, more wet today, or crispy or crunchy or frozen? Are they falling? Is there snow on them? How would I describe them? What do they feel like? What do they sound like? I'm trying to come up with descriptive ways of just that one thing. And sometimes it's the sky. Sometimes I'm trying to describe, or a particular tree or something. So in my head, as I'm walking along, I'm coming up with these various ways of how would I write about this? How would I describe this? And it kind of, I don't know, it's like plugging into the creative juices a little bit. It prompts me to get a little bit more descriptive with my writing, bringing the reader into the scene a little bit more.
It's incredible. I remember hearing the late John Denver. I loved his music. When he was talking about how he wrote Annie's song, it was in his head. He was on a ski lift, and in 15 minutes, he had to go home and write it. He goes, I don't know how these songs come to me, but they do. And I think it's the same way with, maybe a writer writing poetry. It just comes to you at that time.
I can't tell you how many times I've come running in from the garden when I was, could run. I would come running in from the garden, dripping from hosing things off, or muddy or something like that, mud all over my hands, scrambling for a pen because I had to write something or coming out of the shower, just running out of the shower and going, oh my God, and writing something down really quickly. Or waking up from a dream and trying to capture wisps of memories of that dream into stanzas so that I can work with them later and try to create something with them. It happens so often. Yes, it does happen. And often at the most inconvenient time.
Yes, that's what a lot of musicians say, songwriters, that they... they could be in the shower and then, it hits them, or out in nature, and it just, they get this song in their head. I mean, I envy people like that, folks. I really do. I have enough trouble writing a paragraph about something. I know what I want to say in my head. It's just getting it from my head to the paper. That's the problem.
I have a writer friend who writes short fiction, flash fiction type short stories, and she's just phenomenal at it. But she walks around. She says her greatest ideas come when she's walking around. Just walking, not walking dogs or anything distracting, just her walking around. And so she's gotten to the habit now where she carries this little recording device. I guess maybe her cell phone now, but at the time it was a recording device. And she walked around and she would just record her ideas and her stories, or her, character development as she was walking around. I'm sure lots of people looked at her funny, but she just walked around, yak, 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 coming up with all these ideas and spur of the moment, because she said by the time she got home, they were gone already, so she got into that habit.
What advice, Lillian, would you give someone who wanted to write a book of poetry?
Well, you have your collection of poetry sitting there. And so what I would do is I would go through it and see if you have any kind of theme or point that you're trying to make with that particular book. What is this book? What is the purpose of the book? What are you trying to say with your poetry in general? Because every poem's going to be different. But in general, you want to look at that. You also want to look at what you're going to be comfortable releasing out to the public. Like sometimes you think, well, this is a really, I'm really proud of this poem, but am I going to be comfortable with it because maybe it's going to really hurt someone's feelings that still exists, that's still around? There are certain aspects of our poems that maybe need a lot of work before we release it. Are we going to put them in chapters? Are they going to be chronological? Think about some of those themes. Some people do seasonal type themes, whether it's in life or in reality, climate change type seasons. So think about how you're going to construct the book, what it's trying to say, and then really refine your poetry, make sure it's finely tuned, finely edited. I found one of the things that my readers really liked when I did my revisions, new formatting and new revisions of previously published books, was to include little blurbs, little statements from the author saying, hey, I was in this frame of mind, or I wrote this in October 2010, and I was inspired by such and such a thing. And I think that I know that readers really like those insights to see where the poet's mind was when they were writing it, what inspired them to write that particular poem, what they were trying to say, what they were going through in their life. You don't have to say, hey, I was divorcing George and this is what we were going through, but you can say, hey, I was going through some life changes. You can generalize it a little bit without getting too particular, but at least the reader would have some idea as to where you're coming from. I find that's always helpful. Be realistic about your book release and where you expect it to go. Poetry is a difficult genre to sell as a book, so it's not going to be like your racehorse in your backlist of books, but it's definitely it is definitely something that people are always interested in. It's an evergreen topic. You'll never tire of promoting that book. So go for it. Follow your dream. For sure. Just go into it with some realistic, expectations.
Oh, that's very good advice. I always say people, may not like everything that someone does, and that's okay. I think that as if I was an artist and I wanted to, write a poem or a book, maybe paint a painting, I would have to do it from my gut, from what I'm experiencing or what I wanted to put out there. And if people like it, they like it. I mean, you hope they like it because you want to make a profit. Let's be realistic. But, not everyone is going to like everything. And, just like I feel like with my show, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. That's okay. Not everyone's mine either. So, but you got to be true to yourself. And that's I think the thing that's important with anything. Just being true to yourself and doing what you like to do, what you like to write about. And I think when people see that writers or artists are authentic, it will draw people to them.
Absolutely. Poetry is rarely written to market. It's usually written from the soul, as opposed to other types of writing. So, like, for instance, if I was going to write a fiction novel, I would go in and I would look at all of the, top 100 or whatever, top best-selling within that particular genre and subcategories of that topic that I'm going to write in. And I'm going to see what everybody else is doing, what are the things that readers like, what do they don't like, what are reviewers saying, what are the top artists and authors and their PR agents doing to promote that book, and why do I think they're doing that? And so armed with that information, I'm going to take my idea, my original writing idea, and I'm going to tweak it so that I'm matching all of those points. I'm hitting those points to give my book the best start into the market when it gets released, because it's hitting all the points that readers want to see. And I'm ready to address that particular audience because I know them well. That's writing to market. So, but poetry is a lot different. It comes from the soul. It comes from the heart. Even if it's fictional poetry, there's lots of poetry out there that's written in fiction or science fiction, or to tell some sort of epic story through poetry. Instead of writing chapters, they'll write the poems to tell the story. So there's unique ways of using poems, but typically it's written, from the soul, from the heart.
I agree. I definitely can tell by people's poetry that it is written from their heart, deep in their heart. And to me, it's just incredible. Lillian, where can people purchase Poetic Wanderings?
Oh, you go on Amazon, serving any country that you're in, amazon.co.uk for, or .ca for Canada, or .com for the U.S. Just go to Amazon, look up the name Brummet, Brummet, Lillian and Dave Brummet, in the books department, and you'll be able to see all of our books there, listed there, including the Playing with Words poetry series, and Poetic Wanderings is one of those books. And it's a standalone. You can buy just the one book or all three in the series as well. So feel free to browse those. And on Amazon, there's that little look inside, so you can take a little peek inside each of the poetry books if you like as well.
And you also have, if I remember correctly, cookbooks.
Oh, yes. We have cookbooks and writing advice books and green living books, and, oh, my gosh, lots coming up, lots and lots coming up.
Yes. Lillian and Dave, her husband, are very talented writers, and you also own Brummet Media. And I had to tell you, folks, I highly recommend going on Lillian's YouTube channel. What is your YouTube channel called? Is it Brummet Media?
Yeah, Brummet Media channel. That's right.
Excellent advice. And Lillian gives excellent advice on a lot of different areas, and helps. Do you help people? If I'm trying to remember, Lillian, with publishing, do you help people with that?
Well, we don't offer publishing services, but my husband is able to do like formatting, and he helps with book cover design and submitting, uploading to Amazon and things like that. So he can help people with that. Does editing and proofreading services. His schedule is pretty tight and pretty limited, so his openings are few, but he does offer some of that. However, we do give a lot of advice on our blog and also the YouTube channel. And if anyone has questions, they can always submit those questions to us, and we'll respond either with a blog post or a YouTube video. So that's always an option for them. We do have the Purple Snowflake Marketing series. The first book, of course, is available online at Amazon. The second book in that series is coming out within a matter of months. We're very close to having that out. So keep an eye out, everyone, for the book 2 in that series.
And how can people get in touch with you, Lillian?
Oh, just go online and type in Lillian and Dave Brummet or Lillian Brummet. You'll usually see me as the face on socials and various other places. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and Alignable and Bitly and Blue Sky and, oh gosh, a whole bunch of places. So, just type in my name on any internet search engine, and you'll find literally pages and pages and pages of places to find us online, and also links to interviews like this one here today.
Awesome. That is wonderful, and I highly recommend searching out Lillian and Dave I keep saying your name wrong. Brummett. Is it Brummett?
Brummett, yeah.
Brummett.
It can sometimes be a tongue twister, especially with a Lillian in front, right?
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Lillian, for coming on, chatting with Betsy. And I always enjoy talking to you and look forward to chatting with you again. Folks, all the information about Lillian from it will be in the blog that the station manager, Jeannie White, writes, and Jeannie produces the show. And I'd like to thank Lillian Caldwell, who's CEO of Pastoral Talk Radio Network, who makes this all possible. And thank you for listening and subscribing. If you don't already subscribe to Chatting with Betsy, it is for free on Spotify, Spreaker, Apple, and Amazon Music. And share the show. Share the show to help other people. And that's what I'm here for. Because, let's face it, folks, we're all struggling with something. And I'm here to help. I have a lot of guests who are experts in their fields that are coming on the show, have come on the show to help you have a better quality of life. And if you want to follow me, I'm on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel, Wurzel. And if you're looking for a support group, I have hashtag Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind and shine your light bright, because we need it now more than ever before. And that's what I have to say today. I also want to say I highly recommend going on Amazon.com to see all the wonderful work that Lillian and Dave do, and go on their website, because they do have a wonderful blog. I'm on there. Lillian interviewed me back, I think, in August. That interview was on there. And she does a great job. And so thank you, Lillian, for all that you do to help other people, and for sharing your thoughts and feelings in poetry, and for honoring your father-in-law, Frank Nick Brummett. And, folks, that's what I have to say. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Pastoral Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Chat with you soon. Bye-bye now.